when these same states have played the major role in the militarization of the situation in Syria and pushing it away from the desired political solution by providing weapons to the terrorist groups in Syria. This was something which you very well know was acknowledged by the Foreign Minister of France only 3 days ago when he said, and I quote, "There are weapons being delivered to them," meaning to the armed groups, according to our information, from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other states, end of quote. Some of these same Western media outlets have confirmed that and have added that American anti-aircraft Stinger missiles have arrived via Turkey to these armed groups. Add to that some of the sponsoring states this draft resolution are leading a hysterical political media and intelligence campaign against my country, Syria, and are providing all forms of financial and logistical support to the armed terrorist groups, and not to the honest and peaceful internal legitimate opposition. These states are also providing political and media coverage for the armed groups and are enforcing unilateral sanctions that not only conflict with the six-point plan but also constitute an unjust and illegitimate siege against the Syrian nation in violation of relevant UN resolutions. This has escalated humanitarian situation on the ground, the same situation that some parties are grieving concerning them in their statements. If these same states which are expressing their concern for humanitarian situation in Syria were truly sincere in their concern, they would have allocated those billions of dollars that they are spending on the financing and arming of terrorist groups and on providing them with communication equipment and other lethal equipment. They would have allocated them for humanitarian assistance. It should be noted that all the promises given by these states about providing assistance, humanitarian assistance, was nothing but a distraction in order to make the Syrian government appear as the obstacle to these assistance. No one in Syria has seen any part of this assistance so far, even though an agreement was reached with the United Nations concerning the humanitarian response plan several months ago. At the same time, the biggest flaw is that some of the states sponsoring this Saudi draft resolution, such as Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain, cannot in any shape or form be considered an oasis of democracy or the respect of human rights. Indeed, these states are governed by despotic oligarchies that do not hesitate in suppressing their people and killing peaceful protesters inside and outside their own boundaries. The situation of human rights and basic freedoms in these countries is considered one of the worst in the world, according to well-documented reports issued by international human rights and legal institutions and sources of opposition, Saudi and Qatari opposition in diaspora and within the countries. At the same time, the other part of the state sponsoring the draft resolution, in addition to being one of the greatest contributors deliberately in the deterioration of the situation in Syria, do not enjoy any credibility concerning abiding by the content of UN resolutions in light of previous experience, which had proven that these states manipulate and have manipulated many of these resolutions and have designed them to suit their own interests, so in order to grant themselves the excuse for military intervention in other states using excuses such as the removal of mass destruction weapons, the protection of human rights, and the protection of civilians, and many the other important humanitarian principles, which were never, in fact, a true objective of these states, but were mere slogans employed in order to intervene in the affairs of other states and to change by force the systems of government there and to force these states into civil wars, sectarian conflicts, and chaos. In this respect, we would like to draw the attention of the member states to the danger of having this international organization under media and financial and political pressure by these same states provide a cover for the spread of the culture of religiously sanctioned or halal irhab throughout the world, and in undermining stability and security there, or in having this organization contribute in the attempt of granting some kind of legitimacy on agendas that have shaken the confidence and trust of most member states in the rule of law at the international level, especially after the invasion of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and the manipulation of the fate of many developing countries, especially in Africa. My country, Syria, has witnessed during this current crisis a series of suicide terrorist explosions. Additionally, relevant Syrian authorities have succeeded in arresting and in killing a large number of Arab and non-Arab terrorists belonging to Al-Qaeda and other Salafi and Wahhabi extremist groups associated ideologically and intellectually with Al-Qaeda. The paradox here, ladies and gentlemen, is that some countries which have declared continuously their denunciation of terrorism and of the activities of Al-Qaeda and have waged wars under that slogan are today overlooking or supporting directly or indirectly the increasing and growing terrorist activities of Al-Qaeda and of the other terrorist extremist groups in Syria. In implementation of the slogan created chaos. It is no longer a secret that some states have facilitated, have financed, and have incited the sending of terrorists to Syria from all over the world. In this light, we can understand how the sponsors of this draft resolution have deliberately avoided any reference to these terrorists in the draft resolution, because in doing so they would have denounced themselves before they denounced the terrorists. Many of the Western countries which are combating what they call terror sleeping cells in their territory are at the same time awakening similar terror sleeping cells in Syria. Some Arab, regional, and international well-known states are carrying out a public and organized campaign of incitement and provocation for carrying out violence and terrorist acts in Syria. Even though we all know that all of our national penal laws of our member states stipulate that the instigator of a crime should be punished with the same punishment as the perpetrator. Also, the resolutions of the United Nations and international conventions, especially those that address criminal justice and combating terrorism, stipulate that states, groups, and individuals which incite violence and terrorism should be criminalized as well. Add to this the statement in the Holy Quran concerning incitement to murder and discord, where God says discord and internal dissension is worse than murder. So the question we all must address here is the intention of the draft resolution before us here today truly to implement national and international laws in order to hold accountable those involved in inciting terrorism and violence and causing the murder of Syrians, the destruction of their property, and the destruction of the infrastructure, in the attempt to plant discord and internal fighting among the members of the same state. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, it is not a surprise, according to the above, that today we find ourselves confronting a draft resolution that can be described at a minimum as a misleading and a hysterical draft resolution which violates the principles of international legitimacy wholesale, primarily the principle of the respect of national sovereignty and non-intervention in the internal affairs of other states. Therefore, it is clear that the adoption of this draft resolution will send the wrong message to the extremists and terrorists in Syria and outside, specifically that their terrorist acts, which they are carrying out as an alternative to dialogue and to the peaceful settlement of disputes, enjoy the support and encouragement of member states. This will escalate and increase violence and will support terrorism not only in Syria but throughout the region. Terrorism will certainly reach those areas which have created and fostered terrorism, including some of the states which are sponsoring this draft resolution. Therefore, we request that the draft resolution contained in document A66/L57 be put to vote, and we call upon all states not to be an indirect partner in the support of chaos and terrorism and the intervention and the interference in the internal affairs of states and in the attempt to legitimize unilateral sanctions. We appeal to all of you to vote against this draft resolution for all the reasons explained above and in support for the principles we all uphold, including the sovereign equality of all states and the right of peoples to self-determination and to choose their political system free of any outside interference. We had expected from the delegation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to submit a draft resolution for the liberation of the Sanafir and Tiran Saudi islands occupied by Israel in the Red Sea, instead of focusing on manipulating the fate and the status of Palestinian refugees in Syria and in shedding crocodile tears over what he called the blood of the Syrian nation, which we hold very dear to our hearts. The incitement to murder, ladies and gentlemen, has reached a level where Saudi and Qatari media are no longer satisfied with targeting my country, but have targeted me personally and members of my family in an immoral way, unethical way, and a shameful way. And I am standing here proud to defend the interests of my nation against all conspirators, against all conspiracies against my nation, no matter what they are. Things have reached the point where the media of Saudi Arabia and Qatar have attacked me personally in special programs that were several hours long and fabricated lies and false statements to distort the reputation of members of my family, and have used social media sites to incite the killing of Syrians inside and outside Syria. Is this how we combat terrorism? Is this how diplomatic work is carried out? Is this what diplomacy is all about? Ladies and gentlemen, you are all ambassadors defending the interests of your countries, but this is one thing. Diplomacy is one thing, and having members of your family be targeted for that is something else entirely, and I leave that to your conscience, all of you. I add to that having several threats of murder against me and various Syrian diplomats